Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. I just want to make a couple of comments about what the League of Women Voters is before we go into this forum. Our mission is to encourage informed and active participation in government. We also influence public policy through education and advocacy. Our candidate forums are intended to provide the public with good information about the candidates before they vote. The League is very strictly nonpartisan organization. We do not support or oppose any candidates or any political parties. And I want to say it's a real honor to have partnered here with the University of Washington, Tacoma, and thank you very much for that opportunity. So now I'd like to turn it over to our moderators, Omari and Sarah, who can take it from here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Mark. I'm Sarah Hampson. I'm faculty here at UW Tacoma. I'm also the interim co-director for the New Legal Pathways Initiative. I'm very pleased to be co-moderating this event tonight with Omari Emili.
Hi, everybody. My name is Omari Emili. I am a former UW student. I graduated from here with my bachelor's in 2014 and also with my master's in 2016. But for some context, before that, I was a high school dropout and I was convicted of 30 felonies before turning my life around. So I'm honored to be here, invited by UW to participate in this event here today, and I'd like to introduce to you all the candidates who have joined us. So here from running, a candidate for District Court 3 is Lizanne Padula. Unfortunately, Tim Lewis is out sick today. He planned on being here, but he's not able to join us. From District Court 6, John Sheeran. And also Carl Williams. And we have with us today prosecuting attorney candidates Mary Robnett, and Mark Lindquist. Mark is on a tight schedule today, so he's going to make opening statements and he won't be able to take questions, but he will be able to speak with you all today.
Thank you, Omari. Good evening. I'm Mark Lindquist. I'm your county prosecutor.
Excuse me.
It's my job to...
Mark, I'm so sorry.
We're going to roll?
I'm just gonna go ahead and give the
rules
really quickly first, and then we'll hear from Mark first. And thank you so much for being able to come. This is just to lay the ground rules as according to the League's typical timetable. So at this event, the public may ask questions. We have index cards that you should have received coming through the door. You are welcome to see Leilani if you did not receive an index card. These cards are provided for the purpose of asking your questions. These volunteers will collect the cards and bring them to us. We may rephrase questions in order to make them neutral or to consolidate several questions, but we will attempt to ask the questions for which we do have time from the audience. Candidates will have 3 minutes each for opening statements, 2 minutes to answer each question. There will be 2 minutes for closing statements for each candidate as well. There is a timer in the front here who will indicate when there is 1 minute left, then 30 seconds, and then time to stop, and we'll try to keep candidates to that as best we can. We asked, particularly with the audience, that rules of common courtesy apply. The candidates are not going to interrupt each other or engage in crosstalk. And the audience may not interrupt or ask questions of the candidates directly. That's what the question cards are for. Please do not applaud or demonstrate support or opposition in any way during this forum. At the end of the forum, we will thank all of the candidates with a round of applause together. With that, we'll begin, and thank you, Mark. Go ahead and start with your opening statement.
Thank you. Good evening again. I'm Mark Lindquist. I'm your county prosecutor. It's my job to help keep our community safe and to make sure that the justice system is fair and serving our entire community well. One of the first things I did as your prosecutor was form an elder abuse unit. And the woman I put in charge had a sense of humor about her appointment. She would tell people, Mark says there's no I in team, but in fact there is an I in team because I am the entire team. And she was. It was a one-woman team. It's now a 5-person team, and we are a leader in the state in both the prosecution and the prevention of elder abuse. We've also been one of the only counties, one of 9 counties in the entire country to have won a grant from the Department of Justice for almost $400,000 for our comprehensive approach to reducing elder abuse. We've also been leaders in reducing gang violence. Gang violence is dramatically down in Pierce County, and that's due to both effective prosecution, but also prevention efforts with our partners. We're also leaders in therapeutic courts. We have a drug court, a veterans court, and a mental health court, so we can provide services to those who have substance abuse or behavioral health issues. We've been leaders in other areas as well. I am always looking for ways that we can improve and reform the criminal justice system. We're incarcerating people right now at quadruple the rate of 1980. And furthermore, more than half of those people will reoffend within 3 years when they get out of prison. So we have got to do better. One more thing I want to mention is that just last year, we filed a lawsuit against Big Pharma to hold them accountable for their role in the opioid crisis. We're looking for 2 things in this lawsuit. Number 1, injunctive relief to stop their deceptive marketing practices. And number 2, financial relief so we can recover what? What's every lawsuit about? Money, exactly. There's going to be a settlement, I believe, and I want to make sure that Pierce County gets our share of that settlement. So as was already mentioned, I've got to get going to another stop, but I will be leaving my campaign manager here, and she'll be happy to answer any questions. If you have follow-up, she's got my contact info. I find every time I talk at the UW, people want to ask about internships and other opportunities, and we're happy to follow up on that. Before I go, I do want to share with you that at my next event, one of the subjects is civility in politics, how it's on all of us to elevate the dialogue, to elevate the civic dialogue, especially in these incredibly negative times that we're living through. So I want to thank all of you for being here, and I want to thank you for your interest in civics. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you. So Mary, we're going to begin with the prosecutor candidates, if that's all right. Go ahead and give us your opening statement.
Okay. Good evening. I want to thank the League of Women Voters and UWT for hosting this event. It's wonderful to have an opportunity to get out in front of voters as a candidate. This is my first time as a candidate, so it's all new to me, but I very much appreciate the opportunity. I am Mary Robnett, and I'm the nonpartisan candidate for Pierce County Prosecutor. I'm running for this job to really bring a steady hand to an office that's been pretty badly battered by chaos and scandals during the last several years. I've told you I've never run for office before. I am a first-time candidate, but I believe it's going very well. People are responding well to my message, and people want to focus in the prosecutor's office on public safety and professionalism, an office that's strong on ethics, not on politics, because crime isn't partisan and justice shouldn't be political. Even though I'm not a politician, I am a professional prosecutor, and I've been one for almost 25 years. I have the right experience and the right know-how to hit the ground running and take on this job. I spent the first 18 years of my prosecutor career in the Pierce County Prosecutor's Office. I was hired shortly after law school and hired in at the bottom and worked my way up through the ranks to become Chief Criminal Deputy. I spent almost a decade managing the Special Assault Unit, but was eventually promoted to Chief Criminal Deputy, where I was in charge of the entire criminal division of the prosecutor's office. I left the prosecutor's office almost 7 years ago and went to work for the State Attorney General, where I still work today. I'm a manager in the criminal division, primarily prosecuting sexually violent predator cases. I have a strong record of handling important cases here in Pierce County. I prosecuted cases that you recognize, the Parkland rapist, the guy who abducted Zena Linick from her Hilltop home on 4th of July, and her body was found a week later, the Craigslist homicide cases. Many cases I did were in the headlines. Most of the work I did wasn't in the headlines, but it was still really important public service work, important to the community, important to the people involved. I'm running for this office because the headlines I'm seeing about the prosecutor's office now aren't about big cases. The headlines are about scandals and ethic complaints and bar complaints. and violation of the Public Records Act, and huge court judgments and attorney fees where the taxpayers are on the hook for bad decision-making. And I think Pierce County deserves better. I have a different vision for the office, one that's more professional, less political, one where I respect taxpayers' right to know what we're doing, and I respect taxpayers' dollars. My promise to you when elected as prosecutor in Pierce County is that I will put the people's interest above my own interest every day in every decision, as any attorney should. I promise to be open and accountable, tough, honest, ethical, and fair. I would appreciate your vote. Thank you.
So we'd like to start with the first question for you, Mary. We'd like to know, what do you think is most in need of reform in the criminal justice system in Pierce County?
What is the most needed in reform in the criminal justice system in Pierce County? Probably what's most needed everywhere in the country in our criminal justice system. As Mr. Lindquist said, we incarcerate people in this country, I think at the highest rate in the world. I think we have passed South Africa, and we have a high recidivism rate. So in a big picture sense, our criminal justice system really isn't working. We're churning people through a system where we take away their liberty and release them back into society, and they commit another crime. So there has to be some sort of big picture reform from a high altitude view. For a closer view, I think what's really needed here in Pierce County in terms of the prosecutor's office is just, as I said, a steady hand, decisions that put the taxpayers first, the people of Pierce County first, that respect the people's right to know what kind of work we're doing with your public tax dollars, and a real respect for those tax dollars. And that's what I'll bring to this post.
Thank you. Our second question for Mary is, what do you believe are the root causes of racial or ethnic and other disparities in criminal justice outcomes within Pierce County? And what would you do to address them?
So I've reviewed a report by Washington Supreme Court Justice Steve Gonzalez was involved in a report called Racial Disparity in the Criminal Justice System in Washington State. And clearly there are racial disparities and undoubtedly ethnic disparities in the criminal justice system in Washington State. I'm assuming we have the same disparities and the same problems here in Pierce County because we're in Washington. I guess the question is, what are the root causes? I don't know. I don't know what those root causes are, but I think there is a way to find out what some of them are. The root causes come from policies and practices that are implemented by people in a position like a policymaker, like the prosecutor. And certainly we all know that there are disparities, or there have been disparities in the way drug crimes are detected by the police, investigated by the police, and prosecuted. For instance, crack cocaine was prosecuted at a much higher rate than other types of crimes. That ended up resulting in a racial disparity. I think one way to approach this is to look at data in terms of disparate outcomes and then sort of reverse engineer it back to the policies that are resulting in disparate outcomes. I don't know what they are, but I can promise you that I'm willing to look at the data, figure out what really is a disparity, and work on kind of reverse engineering that to find out what are the policies and practices that are resulting in that. I do think the prosecutor plays an important role in examining that with clear and open eyes.
So for our third question, what are the social and economic costs of a tough-on-crime approach to prosecution? Are you thinking about implementing alternative approaches to prosecution in Pierce County?
So yeah, the social and economic costs of tough-on-crime approach, and I guess I should probably define tough-on-crime. Tough-on-crime approach being vigorous, zealous prosecution and our high incarceration rate that I've already mentioned. The social and economic costs are obvious. It costs a lot of money to prosecute and incarcerate people. And people are recidivating at a very high rate when they get out of incarceration. So there's something wrong with our system. It's broken. If we want to incarcerate people for the purpose of punishment, for the purpose of rehabilitation, for the purpose of deterrence, which I think are legitimate reasons to incarcerate people, we should be offering rehabilitation. We should be offering incarceration that actually works, or some period of getting them out of the community in a way that works so that they can get out of the criminal justice system and stop the revolving door. The social costs are huge. The economic costs are staggering. The social costs are huge. People lose their liberty, they're separated from their families, they lose their jobs, their houses, their ability to, gain equity and be a productive member of society. So the social and economic costs are huge. I would like to see much more vigorous, much more robust diversionary courts in Pierce County where people are diverted out of the criminal justice system for certain types of crimes, particularly crimes involving addiction and substance abuse, mental health issues, juveniles who, have a chance of really reforming their lives before they get in too deep. And so I think much more robust effort at diverting people out of the criminal justice system is something Pierce County can accomplish.
Thank you. Audience, if you have your questions ready, you can go ahead and pass those to one of our volunteers who will be walking through. And we have one more question for the prosecutorial candidates while those are coming around. So please do get your questions in. What is the role of the prosecutor in bettering communities in Pierce County?
The role in bettering communities. Well, the prosecutor's job is laid out by statute. There are statutory requirements for what a prosecutor has to do. I believe a prosecutor should be really responsive to the community. The prosecutor has more discretion, in my view, than anybody else in the criminal justice system. So the prosecutor makes a lot of discretionary judgment calls that should reflect community standards. And I think it's incumbent on a prosecutor to not just go out and make a speech or issue a press release or put out information about what the office is doing and what the policies are. I think it's incumbent on a prosecutor and a candidate for prosecutor like me to be out in the community listening to people, taking questions, getting feedback, listening to people and their problems and their concerns, and so that the prosecutor is actually using discretion in a way that does reflect the true community values, the values of the people that we're serving.
Okay, thank you. So we have our first audience question. And
Am I on the hot seat all night? Nobody else is.
She's going to answer for me next.
it's almost over for you. So, what is your response to the recent Supreme Court decision related to the death penalty?
I'm assuming we're talking about the Washington Supreme Court decision that has held the Washington State Supreme Court Washington State's death penalty is unconstitutional under the state constitution. I'm not personally opposed to the death penalty. I'm not morally opposed to it or anything. I obviously respect the rule of law and the decision of the Washington Supreme Court. I've personally tried a death penalty in the past, but the state Supreme Court has said it's unconstitutional, and it's unconstitutional unless and until the state legislature fixes it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we have a couple of other audience questions, but maybe we'll hold those for after the judicial candidates, and then we can open it up to, these are more general and can be asked to anybody. So what we'll go ahead and do, we'll start with the District Court 6 candidates, and if you want to just kind of go in order of seating, we'll do the closing statements in reverse order. That sounds good. For opening statements.
Is that John first or me?
John first, please. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Sheeran. Thank you all for coming here tonight. It's a pleasure and really appreciate you spending your time. I've been a deputy prosecuting attorney for the last 22 years, having tried all sorts of cases from DUI and misdemeanor domestic violence cases to murders and rapes and abuse of children cases. And in that time, and one of the reasons that I'm running, is a recognition that victims need voices in a courtroom. Those that show up in the courtroom every day kind of sometimes lose a little bit of the fear factor that those that show up there for the first time encounter. And it's important to remember that some people that show up in the courtroom have never been there before, are afraid of the system and are afraid of what's about to happen. And it's important that we have a judge that helps create a calm environment for those folks. So for 22 years, I've been a deputy prosecuting attorney, and 7 years ago, I was put in charge of the drug unit. And one of the things that does for you is really gives you an exposure to drug court. And watching how drug court changed lives really kind of impacted how I looked at the criminal justice system. So 4 years ago, when I became the felony division chief, I sat down with the Superior Court and the Department of Assigned Counsel and worked to create felony mental health court. And we've had felony mental health court now for 4 years. I was actually, when you start a new program, you're stuck with actually sitting in through it all. So I was the first DPA for the first year there in felony mental health court. And it was very interesting to see how you could really change a life. These were people that were going to be going to prison for years, costing all of us hundreds of thousands of dollars. But if they could be in a mental health program, that could change their life. And so that actually spurred me on to 2 years, 4 years ago, 2 years ago, we started the DART program so that first-time offenders who are charged in Superior Court, we now divert to district court so that they can not pick up their first felony and not lose all the rights that they would lose, and also get treatment in district court, because in Superior Court, Department of Corrections, frankly, wasn't supervising them well enough and providing them treatment opportunities. And so this year, we've started to create a veterans court in district court. And I've sat down with district court judges, with the district court probation and the Department of Assigned Counsel, and we hope to have our first couple of participants in veterans court before the end of the year. District court judge has the opportunity to really change lives, and creating those programs in district court, particularly the district court, veterans court, as well as a vibrant district court, mental health court, are really my goals. Thank you.
Thank you. Carl Williams.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for coming, and thanks to the League of Women Voters. And thank you. And thank you for the League of Women Voters for presenting this forum. My name is Carl Williams, and I am running for Pierce County District Court position number 6. I've been a pro tem judge for the Pierce County District Court for the past 22 years. I have practiced both civil and criminal law for the past 31 years all over the state of Washington. I grew up, I met my wife, and we raised 2 beautiful children. My daughter Sienna is in the audience tonight, in University Place. District Court is the people's court. We handle traffic infractions, DUIs, simple assault. These are not hardened felons. These are typically your neighbors, your coworkers, your friends. We also have a thriving civil department. We're the court of record in Pierce County for small claims, and we can also handle civil cases up to $100,000. The district court has been very responsive to the changing needs of the community. As John had mentioned, we have a veterans court that's coming online later on this year. There are plans for a mental health court. We also have the DART program, and it stands for Drug Awareness Reduction Team. Ladies and gentlemen, a Pierce County District Court judge can sentence an individual up to 364 days in jail and a $5,000 fine. But more importantly, we can change lives. We can assist an individual in breaking the cycle of domestic abuse or the bottomless pit of addiction. We can make sure that the mentally challenged get the resources they need in order to stop the revolving door in and out of the criminal justice system. When I see the impact that these life changes have on individuals and their families, well, That's the reason why I'm running. I believe good judges make a difference. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm the only candidate in this race who's been rated exceptionally well qualified by the Tacoma-Pierce County Bar Association, by the Washington Women Lawyers Association, and also the Pierce County Minority Bar Association. Ladies and gentlemen, Pierce County deserves the best. My name is Carl Williams. I'm running for Pierce County District Court Judge, position number 6. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. As we said, for District Court 3, we only have one of our candidates with us, but Lizanne Padula, if you'd like to make an opening statement.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. I want to thank Cynthia and the League of Women Voters, and also Sarah and Amari for moderating and taking the time to do all of this. Rarely do people need me to speak louder so I can be heard. Usually they're telling me to be quiet. So I'm Lizanne Padula, and I am running for Pierce County District Court Position 3. And I'm sorry that Mr. Lewis isn't here. I hope he gets better quickly. I've got 25 years of experience doing pretty much everything. I started out as a deputy prosecutor for 5 years. Then I switched over to having my own practice. I've run my small business, small firm, for 20 years. And I was even a reserve police officer for a short period of time until some geographic distance was a problem for me. I thought about running for judge about 8 years ago, and I thought, I don't have enough civil experience, and so I really made a concentrated effort on taking some cases initially for free, because I figured people didn't need to pay me while I was learning these things. And cutting my teeth. I've done everything from prosecution, defense, civil, criminal, state, and I've even done some federal cases here in Washington. The reason that I'm running is I'm increasingly seeing this in society, but the part of the world that I can get in and make a change in is the court system. And so what I'm seeing is a lack of common sense, a lack of humanity, a lack of compassion in these places. And I'm watching it over and over as an attorney, and you can't affect the change that you want to affect as much as when you're actually on the bench. And so that's one of the things I really want to do. I want to balance out the Pierce County District Court and bring a kind of a breath of fresh air in here and say, we need to always be asking ourselves, what are we trying to achieve, and is what we're about to do going to further that? Is it going to achieve that? I've been endorsed by over 40 judges. I'm endorsed by the Pierce County Democrats, the National Women's Caucus, the Black Collective, and just a few seconds ago, forgive me for checking my phone, that was terrible, but I just got endorsed by the TNT, which I'm really excited about. I just really want to get in here, work hard, and see if I can make some positive change. Like Carl said, that person that comes back to you 5 or 10 years from now and says, you held me accountable, but you did it with compassion, and you had a positive change on my life, and poor Amari doesn't know it yet, but I'm going to be cornering him and asking questions about what made the difference, and how did the judges affect him? Were they a factor? Weren't they? So get ready, because when we're done, I'm asking you lots of questions.
Yeah, I'm all for it.
Because I want to learn, and somebody in his position is exactly the person that can help us all learn. And I want to be a part of the solution. And, after 2016, I just realized I needed to be a part of the solution. Thank you. Great, thank you very much. So we have a couple of similar questions for our judicial candidates, and we're just going to go right down the line here and allow you each to answer for 2 minutes. What do you think, as candidates, is most in need of reform in the criminal justice system in Pierce County? Go ahead, John.
With respect to district court, probably the most important thing is changing the way we deal with legal financial obligations. The idea of a fine is to deter people from doing the crime again, whether it's everything from speeding to DUI to domestic violence. The whole point is some reason, find whatever triggers somebody to prevent them or to get them to stop committing the crime. That doesn't really work if somebody's broke. It doesn't help to impose a fine on somebody with a suspended license who's driving to work so they can pay their bills and pay their other fines. So one of the things I would address right away is making sure that the legal financial obligations, the fines, are appropriate when it's going to be a deterrent, but not imposed, and maybe community service hours or work crew is imposed when it's not as helpful.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Williams.
Oh, thank you. There's an issue I feel very passionate about. It's the jail alternative, electronic home monitoring. It's a wonderful alternative to sentencing an individual into jail. The only unfortunate part of that is that in Pierce County District Court, it's financially based. It is a situation where the people that need it the most, the people that are struggling or trying to hold on to their job, if they cannot financially afford electronic home monitoring, it sort of defeats the purpose in that we can't offer that to them, and a lot of times their alternative is to go to jail, and then they end up losing their job. In turn, they may lose their home. There becomes a situation for their family. We've got to change that, and it's not exactly like we're reinventing the wheel. Tacoma Municipal Court has created a program where they've subcontracted with the electronic home monitoring provider, and it allows the indigent and low-income individuals to take advantage of that system. That's one of the first things I'm going to be working on. I don't believe that a jail alternative should be financially based. I think it should be available to everybody who qualifies. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Lizanne?
You know, what John's talking about and what Carl's talking about and the issue that's really important to me, which is that Pierce County doesn't currently have a work release program, it's all three of us recognizing that, you know, financial limitations play such a huge role in what's going on in our court system. And we're all kind of approaching it from a different perspective, with John focusing on the licensing issues, which he's exactly right about, and Carl focusing on electronic home detention so you can stay employed, which he's exactly right about. And my concern with regard to work release is that we're all realizing that, and it goes back to what I was saying about common sense, how can we put somebody in custody for several months and then they lose their job, and when they get out, we want them to pay fines, we want them to pay for treatment, we want them to stay clean and sober. I don't know about you, but the time, if I'm an addict, the time I'm going to sit home and drink is when I'm unemployed, depressed, and I don't know what I'm going to do to pay my bills. And yet we kind of create that scenario, and that's where I want to go back to, what are we trying to achieve, and is what we're about to do going to actually achieve it, or have we become robotic and we're a hammer, so therefore every problem is a nail? You know, courts have a massive tool belt with all these different options. The other day I was on the bench and I sentenced a young man to 10 days of jail, and I said, but you got 30 days to report, and here's the deal. You get enrolled in an inpatient program, I'll give you credit 3-to-1, so 3 days of inpatient treatment is worth 1 day of jail. Because that will tell us, are you more interested in just doing the jail time and getting back out on the streets, or are you, you know, what you're telling me, do you truly believe what you're telling me, and that is that you want to get clean and sober? Because if you do, that guy over there, and I was pointing to another attorney, knows how to get you into treatment that doesn't cost anything. So finances are not an obstacle. What way do you want to go? And to me, that was more creative, kind of trying to figure out what that person needs and spending more time talking to people. And that's what I mean when I talk about the common sense, and that's what I think is most needed.
Thank you. So we'll go back to John now. Same question that we had for Mary. What do you believe are the root causes of racial and ethnic and other disparities in criminal justice outcomes within Pierce County, and what would you do to address them?
I think the root causes of racism in Pierce County are probably the same as they are throughout the country. You have 400 years of institutional racism, and you have people who have grown up with certain beliefs because they've been taught them as a child, their parents were taught them, they have those beliefs. But more importantly, I mean, whether it was slavery or Jim Crow laws or voter suppression that we're reading about today, it's an institutional problem that's existed for longer than this country's existed. The most important thing that we can do as a community or as a bench is recognize the implicit bias that all of us come to our jobs, our lives with. once you start to recognize that, you can at least start to process, okay, how do I want to address some of the other issues that we face in the courtroom or face in our community? Probably the most direct way, Pierce County actually has a very interesting program that they have jurors watching a video on implicit bias before they ever sit on a jury. I think it would probably be a very good idea for courtroom staff and the overall staff of district court to also have the same type of training. And at least then you have everybody in the system understanding that their bias exists, and we can move forward from there and try to address cases individually.
Thank you. Carl, same question for you.
Thank you. There's a lot of wisdom in what John was saying with respect to institutional racial bias, and I appreciate those comments, and I'm not going to go over that portion. But when you talk about the root causes with respect to racial and ethnic and other disparities, for me, my understanding, it comes down to a lack of opportunity and a lack of education, and I think that those two go hand in hand. Because of racially biased institutions and the norms that we've grown up with, it's just harder for people of low income and racial diversity or racial and ethnic divisions to get the opportunity in order to keep them out of the criminal justice system. And when they get in, they're looked at differently, and that has a lot to do with inherent bias. And, you know, that's one of the questions that we have to deal with here later on as far as according to my list. But I will say that in dealing with inherent bias, what we're going to have to start doing, and what I hope to do as a district court judge, we're going to have to take statistics, because I have my feelings with respect to inherent bias, but until we can actually see some statistics, it's just my feeling. I can't prove it. And hopefully the statistics will prove that maybe there isn't any bias, but if they do prove that there is bias, then we can do something about it. Another thing that I think perpetuates the racial inequities is a lack of representation in the criminal justice system with respect to minorities and groups, disadvantaged groups. We don't have and never have had an African-American judge in Pierce County District Court. I think it's 2018, and I think it's time for a change.
Thank you, Carl. Same question. Yeah.
You know, just to follow up with something that Carl Williams just said. So right now, we have 33 judges in the courthouse, counting the municipal court judges, and 2 of them are people of color. We have an opportunity to double that in this election with Dwayne Christopher and Carl Williams, and given how disproportionate that is to the population, I think that's something that really needs to be considered, especially when you've got 2 incredibly experienced and qualified candidates. I would have talked about implicit bias until lately, and now I think it's explicit bias too, and racism. I had a friend that was doing a sentencing hearing for a young African-American man, and he had a large supportive family. The family wasn't doing anything. They were just a large supportive family, and all of a sudden extra security guards come up. Now, how is that family going to have any faith in what's going on and that they got treated the same? I know the judge, they probably did get treated the same, but they don't know that. And that's why when we talk about the law, we talk about the appearance of fairness and actual fairness, because you can be fair, but if you don't look fair, nobody knows it. And you can look fair, but you can actually not be fair. So we need both of those things. And I just don't understand why this is still an issue. I don't understand why, and forgive me for saying such a strong word, but why this ignorance is still going on. And it simply has to stop. And I'm sorry, but you can't train racism away. There's not training that's going to do that. If that's in your core, it's in your core, and that needs to be simply culled away. And I think it's a law enforcement issue. I think it's a judicial issue. I think it's an issue at every single level. And like Carl says, the tracking that we're talking about, and don't get frustrated like, hey, we all know it's there. We all do, but we have to track it down to exactly where it's happening. Like Mary says, we got to figure out where it is and then just attack it. because it just simply cannot exist.
Thank you. There have been a lot of conversations in recent weeks about the role of judges as neutral arbiters, as umpires that call balls and strikes. But judges often have a great deal of discretion, particularly at the level of district court, in their ability to apply the law to individuals at several points during the criminal justice process, bail hearings, parole, sentencing. What is your responsibility to the community to ensure that defendants are treated fairly? So, I suppose so.
I'm asking if we can mix up a little bit who starts.
I look to the league for the rules, so.
Yeah, okay, I didn't,
Sure, let's
and
do
I mean,
that.
Carl can start, I'm not asking to start, I'm just saying if we
You
can.
can start Liz too,
Why
Lizanne.
don't you start, Lizanne?
Sorry, apparently, sorry, I don't mean to be.
It's great.
I hope I'm not coming off Aussie, oh well. You know, it's interesting because of all the stuff that's going on right now, and the thing that I get asked the most out on the campaign trail is, you know, are you conservative or liberal? And I you know, when I embarked upon this election, I really embraced the nonpartisan because I truly believe that. The TNT actually had a great cartoon the other day with a wall and politics on one side and the waves are crashing over the wall and SCOTUS is sitting on the other side, because it really is supposed to be, the courts are supposed to be this neutral, you know, in the middle, non-political, and I agree with Mary that the prosecutor's office should be that way as well. I got an email from a gentleman the other day that said, hey, I met you at an event and you gave me your card and I checked out your website and you've got a lot of endorsements from Democrat legislators and Democrat organizations. And in his opinion, the Democrats have become very intolerant, and he wanted to know if I was going to, you know, be intolerant when somebody who was conservative was in the courtroom. And I went through that explanation of absolutely not, that, you know, I don't care if you come in a Hillary t-shirt or a Trump t-shirt. That's not the issue. The issue is you're a human being standing in a courtroom and you deserve justice and you deserve fairness and you deserve a nonpartisan, non-political response, like Mary says, or I think it was Carl said, you know, justice, fairness doesn't belong to any party. And so we have to really make sure that people know that, because we've got to build the confidence back up in the court system. Anyways, we've got to build it back up, and I think that we do that really starting, you know, I think the statistics are like 500,000 people come through the district court, and if we can start there, then, you know, this time next year, 500,000 people will have seen that the courts are nonpartisan and treated them fairly, and that's the goal. And then we'll get another 500,000 people, and then, you know, like that commercial, they'll tell two friends, and they'll tell two friends, and we'll build back that confidence.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, we'll start with Carl.
Well, thank you. Yeah, Lizanne is right. We've been out on the campaign trail for quite a while now, and that seems to be the prevailing question. It's always, well, you know, I know it's nonpartisan, but wink, wink, you know, are you conservative or Republican, or are you Democrat? And I look at them and I say, my job, my responsibility is to put my personal opinions aside and give you an honest, fair, ethical application of the law to the facts of your case. Do I have personal opinions? Heck yes, I have thousands of them, but that doesn't enter into it. And if you can't put those personal opinions aside, then you can't do the job as a judge. Justice, Lady Justice, she is blindfolded, she holds the scale. The scale is balanced. That has a lot of meaning for me. When you are on the bench and you are trying to give a person a fair, impartial hearing, you can't be prejudiced by your own personal feelings, no matter what they are. And what I try to convey to people is that truth, fairness, justice, and equality, and just like Lizanne says, she's kind of quoting me, it doesn't belong to a political party. It belongs to all of us. And when you come into Pierce County District Court, that's what you'll get. It's a fair and impartial hearing. But another thing that it also talks about our discretion. That's a wonderful thing about district court, because we're not bound by sentencing guidelines. we have full discretion to fashion remedies for individuals. Today, I was in court and I was listening to a bail hearing, and it was another pro tem judge. It was really kind of disappointing because the individual had come into court. He missed his review hearing. He came in, he turned himself in at the counter, and they took him into custody. And my philosophy is that if you come into court voluntarily, then you get to leave, because you're not making us arrest you and bring you in. You're coming in trying to take responsibility for this. Unfortunately, the judge decided that, I'm going to forfeit your bail and we're going to raise your bail, in essence, leaving him in there, and we can do better than that.
Okay, thank you. John?
Thank you. Now I understand why Lizanne wanted to change it up, because all the good ideas get taken right out of the room by the time you're third. The important thing that both Carl and Lizanne were talking about is treating people as individuals, and that's how you're going to treat every case with the care that it deserves, and so that each person gets the understanding and appreciation that they're heard. In so many situations in a courtroom, it's a win or lose situation. Somebody makes an objection, it's sustained or not. Somebody says, I'm not guilty, the jury says, you're guilty. So it's in many ways a binary result. What's important, and everybody knows that going in, what's important is not so much the outcome. And whether it's studies or intuitively, we all know you're not always going to get what you want. But it's important that you are heard, and that the person that is making that decision knows or hears you. And so that's the primary way that we're going to, as Lizanne said, 500,000 people will walk through the courtroom, 500,000 people will walk through the courtroom, and that they are heard is the most important thing. And the way that's done is not always just keeping an open ear. It's recognizing that you have to sometimes meet people where they are and not expect them to come to you. You can't put them in your box. You have to go and find where they are, and whether that's in their emotional state, their legal state, maybe it's their mental health state or their addiction state. You have to get to them, more importantly than them getting to you.
Thank you. So we're going to go ahead and open it back up for audience questions. And these audience questions will be open to all of the candidates, including Mary Robnett. So the first one we have here is, bail is problematic and it has very disparate impacts. Is there a good alternative or better way of making sure people appear in court? And we can popcorn a little bit, just jump in if you want to answer that.
I'll talk about bail. I think this question's about cash bail. So cash bail is a problem, and the question about racial disparity in the criminal justice system came up again with the judicial candidates. And we know there are disparities in the criminal justice system. People of color are contacted by police at a higher rate. They're arrested at a higher rate. They're charged at a higher rate with more counts of crimes. Their bail is higher. Their sentences are higher. We don't know why, all the root causes, but I am willing to look at that data and try to figure out what are the policies and decisions and decision points to remedy that. So cash bail is a problem because bail is, when you get charged with a crime, you can be released on your own personal recognizance, or the court can require you to post bail to ensure that you come back to court. If you're required to post cash bail, it's a problem if you don't have money. It's not a problem if you do. So it obviously has a disparate impact. There is some data that suggests that people who are held pretrial who can't post bail and who are held in custody pretrial have a higher recidivism rate on the other end of their sentence. We're not sure the reasons for that, but it's data that we need to look at. The reasons probably include that they lose their job and their ability to earn money. They go off to prison. They may have unaddressed substance addiction problems. We have to figure out why that's happening. There are probably better alternatives to cash bail, including some sort of monitoring system or, electronic monitoring to ensure that they come back. But I think bail and cash bail is something that we really have to look at and with a critical eye in terms of the long-term impact.
Thank you.
So California recently passed a law that eliminates cash bail. And what it does is it creates a system by which, a risk assessment system, by which somebody sits down with the defendant, goes through certain things that'll kind of determine two things: the likeliness of them to reappear for court dates and the likeliness of them to be a community safety risk if they are released. The system that was created in California was promoted by the AAUW and a number of other organizations that were very interested in prisoner rights and defendant rights. It was changed so much in the last few weeks before it was actually passed that a number of those organizations actually came out against it because it put a lot of the discretion right back in the court's hands. And so, and maybe I'll back up a step, what the judge is determining is not whether the person is held on bail or not. It's, are they detained or released? It's a simple binary decision. But so much of that decision is still left up to the discretion of a judge who has, as we've talked about before, their own implicit biases or their own frustrations or their own fears, that a lot of that risk assessment tool is not going to be as applicable as the original creators of it anticipated. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that system works for California. Are they going to have higher or lower incarceration rates? Are they going to have higher or lower recidivism rates? And I think we're going to find out pretty quickly. So I would like to see a time where we can go to an absent cash bail, but I am not smart enough to sit here and tell you I will always know which defendant will be the most likely to return or the highest risk to community safety. And a really good risk assessment tool is what's going to be necessary to achieve that.
Thank you.
I guess I'm next. In my 22 years of experience as a pro tem judge, these are some of the hardest decisions that we make as far as pretrial release and conditions. And bail in Washington State is one of those. What I like about district court is even in pretrials, we have a lot of discretion and we have a lot of tools. I was taught that there were two basic principles with respect to determining pretrial conditions, and that is community safety and flight risk, whether or not the person's going to return. And we have the availability of their previous record. We can see if they've gone out on warrant status on many times or whether or not they're pretty reliable in coming back. A lot of times when you're talking about community safety, the thing that we're looking at is, okay, if we let this person go, what are the chances that he'll go out and harm somebody? And in district court, the thing I believe that we're most worried about are two. It'd be domestic violence and DUI. And the reason we're worried about that is because we're trying to protect the community at large, because I'm not sure there's anything more dangerous than a highly intoxicated individual behind the wheel. And the other portion of that is that we have to protect victims of domestic violence or assaultive crimes. So some of the tools that we have, at least with respect to the DUI, is interlocking ignition device. We have pretrial services. For substance abuse, we can require that they get urinalysis. We have the ability to try to use measures to try and keep the community safe without having to impose a bail on them, because putting a high bail on an individual is basically the same as saying we're taking you into custody, and if it ends up you losing your job or it ends up you not being able to take care of your kids, well then so be it. And that's the last alternative. And that's why I like district court, because we have better alternatives in order to keep the community safe and let the individual, if possible, still be released.
Thank you.
Actually, earlier this year there was a bail agent conference, and they asked me to come and speak on bail reform, and so I'm going to do one of those lawyer answers about it depends for my answer, because I don't actually support the way that California is doing bail reform, but that's not to say that I don't think the system isn't broken. It is, but I don't think it's broken because of the way it's set up. I think it's broken because of the way that it's applied. In district court, there's a presumption that you will be released on your personal recognizance, and unfortunately, sometimes that gets lost. We're supposed to be applying the least restrictive means, and I know what Mary's saying about the recidivism rate, and she's correct about that. But I think what we need to do is look at ability to pay within this. I mean, for example, one person may donate $100 to a charity, and that's a huge chunk of their monthly income and their ability to pay their expenses. Another person may donate $1,000 and it's nothing to them. Well, to me, the more significant donation was the $100 that really hurt, because that person is really going out of their way to make sure they're donating. And I think it's a little bit, by analogy for how we're setting bail. And I think that we need to start considering people's ability to pay. We have to remember that bail agencies provide a service to the community and the courts. Bail agencies are bringing people that are failing to appear to court, people that are unwilling to come back to court. Bail agencies are going and getting them and bringing them back and allowing the court to address these issues at no expense to the court. And I think that if we take up bail reform, we're, one, taking discretion out of the hands of the judges, and two, we're losing a resource that if we simply use it in a different manner, we can affect the change that we need to make. I agree that it's being disproportionately applied. I agree that there's all these problems. My answer is not, oh, we don't have problems, let's leave it the same. My answer is, yes, we have problems, but I think creating this other system is going to create other problems. And I would like to see if we could make this system work a little bit more fairly.
Okay, thank you. Probably time for 2 more audience questions before closing statements. One of our audience questions is saying, good judges or prosecutors make a difference. Can you give an example, a specific example of when a good judge or a good prosecutor makes a difference? And who do you aspire to be like?
I'll take that one. Go ahead. There's a judge I really respect. His name's Scott Stewart. He's in Issaquah Municipal Court, and he has this phrase about find your Joe DiMaggio. And what he means by that is Joe DiMaggio was never flashy, just got the job done. And so find that judge that you respect that's like that. And unfortunately, I'm Italian and kind of fiery and feisty, and so I don't know that I'll ever be like Scott Stewart is, who just keeps this even thing. But it is something that I aspire to be. And I do want to make a positive change on people, but I think sometimes we assume that we know how to do that. I don't, forgive me if I use you as an example, Amari, but I don't know what made you do what you did in your life, in all phases of your life, and I would never presume that I did. So I think a lot of times we have to listen more. One of the questions I ask folks is, are you the person you want to be? And if you're not, how can we, as a court system, help you get there? And we don't ask that a lot. We assume that we know what's best for people because, we're in a black robe. And the one thing that's really, really important to remember about a black robe is the second you put it on, it means nothing is about you. Nothing. Nothing that goes on in that courtroom is about the judge. It's about the people in that room and how the judge can serve them. And I can't serve you unless I know what you need. And so we need to really talk to people and really figure those things out. And the judges that I really respect are the ones that slow down their court and talk to people and show common sense and show compassion and listen. One of my great mentors is Susan Owens on the Supreme Court, and she says it's all about listening. And that's really what it is, and that's where I think the judges who do this job really well, they do that.
Thank you. Who'd like to jump in?
I think the question was, do judges or prosecutors really make a difference? Yes, they do. Judges and prosecutors really make a difference. And I'm running for prosecutor. The elected job of prosecutor sets a lot of policy and sets a lot of practice. As I've said, there are, it's my aspiration when I'm elected to look at some of the data that we know exists in terms of some of our problems and really examine the practices and policies that are contributing to some of the things that we dislike about the system, some of the disparities that we recognize. The prosecutor also sets the tone for the culture within the office. And as I said, the prosecutor has more discretion, I believe, than anybody in the criminal justice system. The prosecutor doesn't answer to anybody except the voters in terms of the decisions that the prosecutor makes. So I think that it's really imperative that a prosecutor set a real tone from the top for the culture of an organization, that the best interest of the taxpayers and the people who live in our communities are at the forefront of everything we do, every day, every decision we make. That's one reason why I'm running as a nonpartisan, even though this is legally a partisan office. To me, it's so important that the office be run in a nonpartisan, non-political way. There's no room in the prosecutor's office for anything but decisions that involve doing the right thing for the right reason and seeking justice. There is just no room for politics, for political grandstanding, for political promotion of personal careers or image management or decisions based on anything like that. So it needs to be nonpartisan, and it is an important job.
Thank you.
Well, I guess I'll go next. When I'm out on the campaign trail, that's a thing I keep repeating, is that good judges make a difference, and I wholeheartedly believe that. I've had, in my 22 years of experience, I've had several occasions where individuals have come up to me. Sometimes I remember them, sometimes I don't, but what they say is that you made a difference, that you made a difference in my life, that your decision helped me take a different path. And when you experience that, you just want more. It's just as though, as Liz Ann said, we serve. You know, we're called to this, and to be able to help somebody go in the right direction is a feeling that's pretty undescribable. But when I think about this job and what it means, I think about a Thurston County Superior Court judge. He was retired, but he was doing a mediation for us in my office, and I told him of my aspirations to be a judicial officer in Pierce County. And what he said to me was, "Oh, you want to be a judge? Oh, well, that's the easiest job in the world, unless you care about people." And that always stuck with me, because if you care about people, it's a very, very difficult job. But it's one that you aspire to, and it's one that if you can do well, you know you've served your community, your county, and the people that come before you, and there's nothing more honorable. As far as heroes, Thurgood Marshall, closer to me, it would be Franklin Burgess, because I had the privilege of growing up and going to law school with his son. And Franklin Burgess, as a district court judge, took the time to mentor me, and also Frank Cuthbertson. I've had a lot of mentors, and in the district court and in the Superior Court, and it means a lot to me, and their support means a lot to me as well. Thank you.
Thank you. John?
If I understood the question, it was an example of how what you've done has impacted others. And I think the creation of Mental Health Court has been probably one of my prouder moments as a prosecutor. We started out with the idea of helping people, and we had a limit of 40 people. And Optum was so happy with how things were progressing. After a year and a half, they doubled that to 80. So we have 80. We're working up to get to 80 participants. We learned so much along the way. It was, I want to say comical, except it was painful. And I know, looking back in retrospect, it's funny how you see the mistakes and say, how did we miss that? When I started with Mental Health Court, we didn't really appreciate dual diagnosis. About 80% of our participants in mental health court also have substance use disorders. It's the learning curve that has really made me proud of the way we have adjusted, the way we have grown, and how we've taken what we didn't know and applied it, and then helped, frankly, so many people avoid prison sentences. So that would be the one thing that I've been most proud of as a deputy prosecutor. I know this is going to, as far as somebody that I admired as a judge, it was actually probably the first judge I appeared in front of on a regular basis, who was Judge Heller. And it's not because he was scholarly or he was, he had a way of keeping the courtroom calm. And he just kept everybody calm. You didn't have to agree with him all the time. There are plenty of times I didn't, but he had this way of just saying, okay, I understand what you're saying. You're wrong. And we're moving on. So, thank you.
Thank you.
So we have another audience question here. There are many students in our audience tonight. Do you have any plans or ideas for how to get youth more aware of the law and our judicial system?
Well, I'll start. The Pierce County Minority Bar Association for many years has had the Youth in Law Forum, and we're very proud of that. We bring in youth, usually at risk, also students from the area, and we sit them down in the courtroom. We bring in law enforcement, people from the prosecution, judges, and people from the defense bar. And we go through a scenario that they might experience in school or in their young life. And we have them take roles as the prosecution team or the defense team or as the bench team as far as being the judge, and let them experience what we do. Also, it gives them an opportunity to interact with law enforcement, which we think is very important because they are there to help and protect us, and they shouldn't be feared. So through this exercise, and we do it every year, we try and get these party holders, these stakeholders together so that they can understand each other's roles and understand the role of the court. As a part of the Bar Association, we have May Days and Law Days and things of that nature where we go out into the community and share our experiences and talk to youth and students in order to understand whether or not they may be seeking careers in the legal field. And it's important to me, and I try and get out at these events, especially to recruit disadvantaged youth and minority youth, because that's where it starts. We've got to get to these young kids and let them know that it is a goal that is achievable to them. I always want to get into to where they're at, go to them and let them know, hey, you can do this. If you want to be a part, if you want a career in the legal field, it can be done. And I think that it's a part of our responsibility to give back, to mentor these people, to bring everyone into the judicial community who wants to participate.
Thank you.
Carl's right. The one thing that district court can do a little better on, and Superior Court probably too, is to bring people into the courtroom for short internships and have them be educated as about the system by actually participating in it. For students that are interested in the law, I'll say there's only one thing that I would recommend is write. It's what you do. You think you communicate verbally, but the truth of the matter is, as a lawyer, you write. That's all you spend 90% of your time writing, it seems like.
Thank you.
As I've been out and about, going to a lot of events, and I've been kind of surprised, and I don't mean this as a criticism to the current bench, because we actually have a really amazing bench in Pierce County, but when you're going to the Urban League Gala, when you're going to the chaplaincy lunch today, and the Hilltop Action Coalition and those things, and I was really surprised that I wasn't seeing judges there. So, and I'm a firm believer that the judges isolate themselves way more than they need to. I think judges can be out and about in the community and be visible, and it's one of the things I've really tried to do. I also think that we should consider summer outreach internship programs, the judges being active in local high schools for moot court competitions and debate competitions. I mean, most of the judges that you have on the Pierce County bench, have been trial attorneys. And I got to tell you, there's nothing more fun than being a trial attorney. I mean, getting in court and doing that is really an amazing thing. And I wish that more people could feel that, because you're on your game. You're watching everything that happens, and it is. I don't want to say it's like a sport, but in a way it is. Like you're watching your opponent and you're figuring out what they're going to do, and that's exciting. You come home exhausted at night, and you're just sitting there, but it's like you're exhausted because you're on guard. You're remembering everything that happens. I mean, I'm going to really miss being an advocate. But getting kids in to see that, having them shadow, having judges having mentorship programs, that kind of stuff, that is really important to me, and it's something that I really hope to be very active. Actually, I promise that I'm going to be very active in that, because we're losing some of that. The enrollment in law schools and the really passion for the tradition of it and the sacredness of it. I worry that it's getting lost, and it's an amazing profession. I love being a lawyer.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I do think that it's very valuable to have lawyers and judges going out to classrooms. Carl mentioned mock trials with young kids. I can remember going to classrooms of third and fourth graders, and we can actually, with the teacher's help, enact a crime, have witnesses, have people play prosecutor and defense, and it's a pretty exciting way to spend a 45-minute class with third and fourth graders. But yeah, I think there's great opportunity for prosecutors and defense attorneys, judges, to interact with students of all ages, including here at UW-T, to expose them to the law and what's going on. I'm like Liz Ann, I love trying cases. I love being a trial lawyer, and I've had sometimes classes of kids come fill a courtroom to watch parts of a trial. Sometimes trials are just dreadfully boring, and they spend an hour or two there, or 90 minutes doing something dreadfully boring. But I mentioned that I do a lot of sexually violent predator work right now, which can be pretty graphic for a courtroom. And I was trying a case in Spokane a couple years ago, and high school class came in, and it was very, very uncomfortable to have these teenage kids listening to the testimony that was going on that day. So it was pretty graphic. So yeah, I don't have much to add. I think there's plenty of room for us in the legal profession to interact with schools.
Thank you. So just as faculty member here at UW-Tacoma, may I welcome all of you to our classrooms and our campus as a place to do that. And we will come find you at work too for internships and such. So what we'd like to do now is offer each candidate 2 minutes for closing statements. We're going to go in reverse order that opening statements were given. So we'll start with Liz Ann, go through the judicial candidates, and then end with Mary.
Thank you for your interest in these races, and I have to embarrassingly admit, before I started running, I hadn't been to this, and it, this whole campaign has been really interesting for me, because it's been very eye-opening in so many ways, and I realize all the things I wasn't doing, and I realize that everybody here can do more and be more, and I mean that most of all for me. And so this has been an incredible thing, and thank you for being interested and being civically aware. As I've said, you guys have probably gotten a pretty good feel of who I am, and one of the things on my material, my cell phone number is listed on my material, and that's because I need to earn your vote, and you need to get to know me, and if you have any questions, please feel free to email me, please feel free to call me. I had a guy call me at 2 in the morning, and just to find out if I would really answer my phone at 2 a.m., and I said, okay, but can I go back to sleep now? And he said, yes, and I'll vote for you, and I said, great, okay. But I've been really amazed at just the learning curve in this campaign process, and I really do want to get in here and do a good job, and I want the community to hold me accountable, and I welcome anybody who thinks I'm not doing this job right. to come in and tell me that. Like Carl, I've also been rated exceptionally well qualified by the Pierce County Bar Association and the Minority Bar Association. He's got 3, I've only got 2, so I'm behind him a little bit. What else can I tell you guys? I just want to learn. I want to get in here and do a great job, and I really appreciate everybody giving me the opportunity to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl.
I wanted to say thanks again to the League of Women Voters. I've always admired what they do beyond just the candidate forums, the voter registration, and the work that they do to make sure that our system works well. Nothing changes in our society without voting, and the League of Women Voters has always been at the base of that. If my wife were here, she'd say, part of her critique would say, well, you're just not showing enough passion. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this isn't the first time that I've run, and I've run several times. Liz Ann keeps reminding me how many times I've run. But I do have passion. I do have passion for Pierce County District Court, and I think I've demonstrated that with my perseverance in trying to get to this position and my 22 years of service as a pro tem judge. You have to love the law. You have to love the law in order to put yourself through what is necessary in order not only to be a good judge, but to want to be a good judge. And from an early age, I knew I was going to be a lawyer, and I knew once I started pro-temming that's what I wanted to do as far as being a judicial officer in Pierce County. John was right. Judge Heller was a great judge, and he still would be. But for his physical ailment, he would still be on the bench today. And the one thing that he told me right before he made the announcement that he was going to retire, we were talking about a case that I was on the bench for him. I was substituting for him, and we were talking about a case, and we were going back and forth. And he just looked at me and he said, that's why I love this job, because I love the law, because it's equal for everybody. It gives everybody an equal opportunity if it's fairly applied. Our system, it can be wonderful, it can be better, and I just want to be a part of making it better. And that's why I'm running. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
I also want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting tonight, and I also want to thank all of you for coming out. I know it's not exactly on the number one to-do list on a Tuesday evening, but really appreciate your interest in all of these races. 22 years as a prosecutor, I've really learned it's about justice. We actually only charge about half the cases that the police bring us. We make sure that half those cases never even get filed, whether it's because the law isn't on our side, or we don't think somebody did it, or we don't think we can prove it, or it just wouldn't be just for us to prosecute the case. I've always enjoyed helping people. The most part is the most enjoyable part of the job, whether it's victims getting through a case. There's nothing like standing with either a domestic violence victim or the victim of a child sex case and walking them into the courtroom. There's also nothing like the flip side of that is helping defendants do better as well, and that's why mental health court has been such a part of why I am running. And that's what I want to do, is bring mental health court also to district court. I think it's something that I've got a passion for, alternative courts, and it's the best way that I can see that we can help some seriously disadvantaged people, whether they have mental illness or substance abuse, and ensure that they don't recidivate. It doesn't do any of us any good to have somebody go into jail, go into prison, and not get the treatment they need just to come out and victimize again. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary?
Thank you. I want to, again, thank you all for hosting this event. It's really wonderful to have an opportunity to get in front of voters. As I said earlier, the prosecutor really only answers to the voters. And this November, the voters are going to hire an attorney to represent them for the next 4 years. The prosecutor doesn't just prosecute crimes, but the prosecutor represents the county in every respect. The prosecutor serves as the civil advisor for departments within the county. And when I'm elected, I will be an attorney that you can hire who will put your interest first every time, above my own self-interest, every day in every decision. Pierce County has a crime rate. We are number one. We have the unfortunate status of being number one for violent crime, the number one county in the state. Tacoma has the status of being the number one city for violent crime in the state. This is an issue that desperately needs to be addressed. I am fortunate to be endorsed by every law enforcement agency that is involved in endorsing anybody in this race. I know that I can work collaboratively and cooperatively with law enforcement to address this really pressing need. I also want to mention some other endorsements that I think are meaningful. I'm endorsed by Pat McCarthy, a Democrat, current state auditor, former county executive who worked with the incumbent for 8 years. I'm endorsed by Rob McKenna, prominent Republican, who hired me at the Attorney General's office, and he knows my work ethic and my character. And I'm endorsed by Jerry Horn, the former prosecutor for Pierce County. Jerry and I were both supportive of Mark when he got appointed to that post, and both supportive of him when he first ran. And it's awkward for me to be running against Mark Lindquist. We were longtime colleagues and friends, but it's literally about the job. There have been, as I said, too many scandals, too much chaos, too much wasted taxpayer money, too much erosion of trust by the taxpayers and voters. So I'm asking you to hire me as your attorney for the next 4 years when you vote in November. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we please thank all the candidates, but also thank you for coming out tonight? I have one last thing to say. Go vote.